The sun hung heavy in the Montana sky, painting long shadows across the lonely cemetery where Zachary Williams first saw her. A woman in a plain blue dress, kneeling beside a fresh grave, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Though he'd ridden into Silver Creek to deliver a herd and collect his pay, something about her solitary figure pulled at him, familiar as his own reflection. Tying his horse to the cemetery fence, he removed his hat and approached with quiet steps. The year was 1878, and like many men who roamed the Western Territories, Thomas "Tom" Williams carried his ghosts with him. 3 years had passed since he'd buried his young wife and infant son, victims of a fever that swept through their small Kansas homestead. Since then, he'd taken to the trail, driving cattle from Texas to Montana, sleeping under stars that offered no comfort but at least asked no questions. He stopped a respectful distance from the woman. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, falling around her face like a curtain. The headstone was simple, bearing the name Benjamin Miller and dates indicating a life cut short at 27 years. "Madam," he said softly, not wanting to startle her, "I don't mean to intrude." She turned, revealing a tear-streaked face that somehow maintained its dignity despite her grief. Her eyes were the color of spring violets, red-rimmed but clear. "My brother," she said, answering the unasked question, "3 days ago, shot by rustlers while defending our ranch." Her voice broke slightly, but she straightened her shoulders. "I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you this." Tom nodded, understanding the need to speak loss aloud to make it real. "May I sit with you a moment?" he asked, indicating the space beside her. She studied him, taking in his trail-worn clothes, the dust of the drive still clinging to his boots, the weathered lines of his face that suggested he was in his early 30s. "I'm Zara Miller," she said by way of answer, shifting slightly to make room. Tom lowered himself to the ground beside her, placing his hat on his knee. "Thomas Williams. Tom." They sat in silence as the late afternoon light slanted across the cemetery. Tom noticed wildflowers placed carefully at the base of the headstone, their bright colors a defiant stand against death's finality. "Your brother," Tom said finally. "Was he a rancher?" Zara nodded. "The Double M Ranch, about 10 miles west of town. It was our parents' place. They died 2 winters ago, and Ben took over. I came from St. Louis to help after they passed." Her fingers worried the fabric of her dress. "Now it's just me." Tom looked at the grave, then back at Zara. "I lost my wife and son to fever 3 years back in Kansas, had a small place there. Couldn't stay after." He trailed off, surprised at himself for sharing what he usually kept buried. "I'm sorry," Zara said, and unlike the empty condolences he'd heard too often, hers carried the weight of someone who understood. A cool breeze swept through the cemetery, rustling the leaves of a nearby cottonwood. Zara shivered slightly, and Tom noticed the sun was beginning to set. "It's getting late, madam. May I walk you back to town?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, but I have my wagon. I need to get back to the ranch. The hands will be wondering where I am, and there's still so much to do." Tom stood and offered his hand to help her up. She took it briefly, her grip surprisingly strong despite her slender fingers. "You're managing the ranch alone?" He asked, unable to hide his concern. "I'm trying to," she admitted. "We have 4 hands left, good men, but Ben was the one who knew the business." She brushed dirt from her dress with trembling hands. "I'll figure it out, I have to." Tom walked her to her wagon, a sturdy buckboard hitched to a patient bay gelding. As she climbed up to the seat, he felt words forming that he hadn't planned. "Mrs. Miller, miss," she corrected. "I never married, Miss Miller. I've been on cattle drives for 3 years now. Before that, I ran my own spread. If you need help getting things in order, I could delay moving on for a spell." Surprise flickered across her face, followed by wariness. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." Tom glanced back at the cemetery. "Maybe because sitting there with you felt like the first time in 3 years I wasn't alone with my grief." He met her eyes. "Or maybe just because it's the right thing to do." Zara studied him for a long moment. "We can't pay much right now, not until we sell this year's herd." "I'm not asking for charity work, just fair wages when you can. I've got money saved." She nodded slowly. Come out tomorrow then, we'll see if we can help each other. Tom watched her drive away, wondering what had possessed him to make such an offer. He'd planned to rest in town for a few days before joining another drive north. Instead, he found himself securing a room at the boarding house and inquiring about the Double M Ranch. Tough situation out there, the proprietor, Mrs. Hayes, told him as she showed him to a small but clean room. Benjamin Miller was well respected, built that place up nice after their folks died. Those rustlers hit 3 ranches last month, but the Millers were the only ones with casualties. The sister's running it now, Mrs. Hayes nodded. Zara's a capable woman, educated too. Taught school back east before coming here, but ranching's hard enough with a man at the helm, a woman alone. She shook her head. Some say she should sell to the Harrington outfit. They've been buying up every struggling ranch in the county. Tom thanked her for the information and settled in for the night, his mind on the woman in the cemetery and the grief they shared. The next morning, he rode out to the Double M, following directions from the livery stable owner. The ranch sat in a verdant valley, a substantial 2-story house overlooking corrals, a barn, and several outbuildings. A creek wound through pastureland where cattle grazed. It was a fine spread, one that would have made Tom envious in his former life. Zara was in the corral, working with a young ranch hand to sort cattle. She wore practical riding clothes, a split skirt, and sturdy boots, her hair tightly braided and tucked under a wide-brimmed hat. She spotted Tom and excused herself, coming to meet him at the fence. "You came," she said, as if she'd half expected him not to. "Said I would." He dismounted, leading his horse to the hitching post. "I should warn you," she said, lowering her voice. "The men aren't thrilled about a stranger coming in. They've been loyal to my family for years." "I'd expect nothing less," Tom replied. "Good hands protect their own." She led him to the barn where 3 men were repairing tack. Tom recognized their type, immediately weathered, capable cowboys who'd seen their share of hard times and good. The oldest, a man with a salt and pepper beard, eyed Tom suspiciously. "This is Mr. Williams," Zara introduced him. "He's going to help us for a while." "Madam, we don't need outside help," the older man said. "We can manage." "Frank," Zara said firmly. "Mr. Williams has experience running a ranch. We need that right now." Frank exchanged glances with the others before nodding reluctantly. "As you say, Miss Zara." The next hours were spent touring the property, Tom taking mental notes of what needed immediate attention and what could wait. The ranch was generally well maintained, a testament to Benjamin Miller's care, but certain tasks had clearly been postponed following his death. "Your cattle look healthy," Tom observed as they rode along the creek. "Good bloodlines." "Ben was particular about breeding stock," Zara said with pride. "He had plans to expand next year, maybe even add Herefords to our Longhorns." "Smart thinking," Tom agreed. "Herefords winter better in this climate." As they crested a hill overlooking the western pastures, Zara reined her horse to a stop. "This is where it happened," she said quietly. "Ben and the hands spotted rustlers cutting out some of our prime steers. They gave chase. The rustlers ambushed them here." Tom surveyed the terrain, noting the rock formations that would have provided cover for an ambush. "Has the sheriff identified the rustlers?" Zara's mouth tightened. "He says he's investigating, but—" She shook her head. "Sheriff Daniels spends more time at Harrington's ranch than he does enforcing the law." "Harrington, the one buying up ranches," James Harrington, she confirmed. "He owns the biggest spread in the county. The Circle H came here 5 years ago from back east with money to burn. He's been trying to buy the Double M since my parents died, offered Ben half what it's worth." Tom studied her face. "You think Harrington had something to do with the rustling?" "I can't prove anything," she said carefully. "But it's convenient that after Ben refused his latest offer, we started losing cattle, and then—" Her voice faltered. They rode back to the ranch house in contemplative silence. As they neared the corral, Frank approached with a troubled expression. "Miss Zara, riders coming." "It's Harrington and his men." Tom watched 4 riders approach, the lead man astride a showy black stallion. James Harrington was younger than Tom had expected, perhaps 40, expensively dressed in a manner that seemed designed to announce his wealth rather than serve any practical purpose. "Miss Miller," Harrington called, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "I heard you've taken on additional help." His gaze shifted to Tom, assessing and dismissive. "Mr. Harrington," Zara acknowledged coolly, "this is Thomas Williams, our new foreman." Tom raised an eyebrow at the promotion but said nothing. "I see." Harrington dismounted, handing his reins to one of his men. "Perhaps we might speak privately, Miss Miller, about my offer for your property." "There's nothing to discuss," Zara replied. "The Double M is not for sale." "Not to you, not to anyone." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you're still grieving your brother's unfortunate accident." "It wasn't an accident," Zara cut in sharply. "Of course, forgive me, a terrible tragedy." Harrington stepped closer. "But you must be practical, Miss Miller. A woman alone cannot manage a ranch of this size, especially with rustlers about. My offer still stands half again what I offered your brother, enough for you to return east and live comfortably." Tom moved slightly, positioning himself between Zara and Harrington. "Miss Miller has made her position clear." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Someone who knows the value of good land and honest work," Tom replied evenly, "and someone who doesn't appreciate bullying tactics." Tension crackled between them until Harrington stepped back with a forced laugh. "No one's bullying anyone, Cowboy. I'm making a business proposition." He turned to Zara. "Think about it, Miss Miller. This offer won't last forever, and there are more dangerous things out here than rustlers." After Harrington and his men rode away, Zara released a shaky breath. "Thank you for standing with me." "Man like that respects only strength," Tom said, "and he's up to something. No businessman offers more for property that's potentially in trouble unless he knows something others don't." That evening, Tom joined Zara and the hands for dinner in the ranch house kitchen. Despite initial reservations, the men seemed to warm to him as he shared his knowledge of cattle and ranching operations. Zara, he noticed, was quiet, pushing food around her plate more than eating it. After the hands retired to the bunkhouse, Tom helped her clear the table. "You should eat," he said gently. "Can't run a ranch on an empty stomach." She managed a small smile. "I haven't had much appetite since Ben." She set down the plates she was carrying. "May I ask you something personal, Mr. Williams?" "Tom," he corrected. "And yes, how did you go on after your wife and son?" Tom leaned against the counter, considering his answer. "Poorly at first, drank too much, considered not waking up at all." He met her gaze. "Then I got angry. At God, at the world, at myself for not being able to save them. Sold the farm and took to the trail. Figured if I kept moving, grief couldn't catch me. Did it work? No," he admitted. "But somewhere along the way, I started remembering the good times more than the end. Started feeling guilty for being alive, then realized that was an insult to their memory." Zara's eyes filled with tears. "I keep thinking I should have been here. Ben sent me to town for supplies that day. If I'd been faster, or if I'd been with him instead." "Then you might be in the ground beside him," Tom said bluntly. "And the ranch would be in Harrington's hands by now." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You're right, I know you're right. It's just hard," Tom finished for her. "It's hard, and it'll be hard for a while yet. But you're doing what needs doing. That takes courage." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. The next weeks established a rhythm. Tom worked alongside the hands, repairing fences, managing the herd, and teaching Zara the business aspects of ranching that her brother had handled. She proved a quick study, her determination evident in everything from learning to brand, calves to negotiating with the mercantile owner in town for better prices on supplies. One afternoon, Tom found her in the ranch office, poring over ledgers with a furrowed brow. "Problem?" he asked, setting down the coffee he'd brought her. "Maybe." She indicated a column of figures. "Ben kept meticulous records of our cattle counts. According to this, we should have nearly 50 more head than we actually do." Tom frowned. "That's a significant loss, more than casual rustling." "Exactly, and look at the dates." She pointed to entries spanning the last 3 months. The losses increased after Ben refused Harrington's last offer. You think Harrington's behind the rustling? I can't prove it, she said, frustration evident in her voice. But who else benefits if we fail? Tom considered this. We need evidence, and we need to protect what cattle we have left. They developed a plan. Tom and two of the hands would take turns watching the herd at night, particularly the remote western pastures where the ambush had occurred. Zara insisted on taking a shift as well, despite Tom's objections. It's my ranch, she said firmly. I won't ask the men to take risks I'm not willing to take myself. 3 nights later, Zara and Tom were positioned on a ridge overlooking the western pasture. The moon was nearly full, casting enough light to see movement below. They'd been there for hours, speaking little, when Zara suddenly gripped Tom's arm. There, she whispered, pointing to shadows moving among the cattle. Through his field glasses, Tom counted 5 riders carefully cutting several steers from the herd. They're wearing bandanas over their faces, he murmured, but that's a Circle H brand on that lead horse. Harrington's men, Zara confirmed grimly. We need to alert Frank and the others, Tom said. They're covering the north section. There's no time, Zara argued. They'll be gone with our cattle before we can gather the men. Before Tom could stop her, she had mounted her horse. Zara, wait. He hissed, but she was already riding down the slope, rifle in hand. Cursing under his breath, Tom mounted and followed. Zara fired a warning shot into the air, startling the rustlers and causing the cattle to bellow in alarm. That's far enough, she shouted. Drop your weapons and step away from those steers. The rustlers reacted quickly, drawing their guns. Tom urged his horse forward, desperate to reach Zara before bullets started flying. He fired his own rifle, deliberately aiming high. We've got you surrounded, he bluffed loudly. Frank, Jim. Hold your positions. The ploy worked momentarily, causing the rustlers to hesitate and look around for non-existent threats. In that instant of confusion, Tom reached Zara and pulled her behind the cover of a large boulder just as gunfire erupted. That was foolish, he growled, reloading his rifle. It worked, didn't it? They're not getting away with our cattle. They might get away with our lives, Tom retorted, but he couldn't help admiring her courage. The standoff continued for several tense minutes until a shot from the ridge announced the arrival of Frank and the other hands. Outmanned and exposed, the rustlers retreated, abandoning the cattle they'd been attempting to steal. Should we go after them? Frank called down. No, Tom replied. We've got what we need. I recognized one of them, Harrington's foreman, Ellis. Back at the ranch house, they discussed their next move. We need to inform the sheriff, Zara insisted. And if he's in Harrington's pocket, Tom countered, we need more than our word against theirs. Then we'll get more, Zara said determinedly. Tomorrow we ride into town and speak with Judge Wilson. He's always been fair and he knew my father well. The next morning they dressed in their best clothes and rode to Silver Creek. Judge Wilson, a stern but respected figure in the county, listened to their account with growing concern. These are serious accusations against a prominent citizen, he said gravely, but I've had my suspicions about Harrington for some time. Too many small ranchers forced to sell out under mysterious circumstances. He agreed to issue a warrant for the arrest of Harrington's foreman on suspicion of cattle rustling, with the stipulation that the sheriff involve the U.S. Marshal's office in the investigation to ensure impartiality. As they left the judge's office, Tom noticed Zara's hands were shaking. You did well in there, he said softly. I'm terrified, she admitted. Harrington won't take this lying down. No, Tom agreed, which is why we need to be prepared. They spent the afternoon purchasing additional ammunition and supplies, aware that confrontation was inevitable. As they loaded their wagon, a commotion down the street caught their attention. Sheriff Daniels was escorting Harrington's foreman, Ellis, into the jail, followed by a stern-looking man wearing a U.S. Marshal's badge. Judge Wilson works fast, Tom observed. Let's hope justice works just as efficiently, Zara replied. They returned to the Double M to find Frank and the hands on high alert. Riders came by while you were gone, Frank reported. Harrington's men said the boss wanted to speak with Miss Zara personally. I imagine he does, Tom said grimly. Double the watch tonight, no one rides alone. That night, Tom found Zara on the porch, staring into the darkness. He joined her, leaning against the railing. "Penny for your thoughts," he said quietly. "I was thinking about Ben," she replied. "About how proud he was of this place, how determined he was that it would always stay in the family." She turned to face Tom. "And I was thinking about you, me, about how different things might have been if you hadn't sat beside me that day in the cemetery." Tom moved closer, drawn by something in her voice. "I'm glad I did." "Why did you?" she asked. "Really?" He considered his answer carefully. "Because I recognized something in you, a kind of strength that comes from bearing unbearable loss and continuing anyway." He paused. "And because for the first time in 3 years, I saw someone who might understand what I've been carrying." Zara's hand found his on the railing. "I do understand," she said softly, "and I'm grateful every day that you stayed." Their eyes met in the dim light from the window, and Tom felt something shift inside him, a wall beginning to crumble, a wound starting to heal. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her. Her lips were soft against his, tentative at first, then more certain. When they finally broke apart, Tom saw tears glistening on her cheeks. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again," she whispered. "Hope, possibility." "Neither did I," he admitted, brushing a tear from her face. The sound of approaching horses interrupted the moment. Frank appeared at the corner of the house, rifle in hand. "It's Harrington," he reported tersely, "and he's brought a small army." Tom and Zara exchanged glances before stepping off the porch to meet the threat. Harrington sat astride his black stallion, flanked by at least 10 armed men. His usual polished demeanor had given way to barely contained rage. "You've made a serious mistake, Miss Miller," he called. "Accusing my men of rustling. Ellis is a loyal employee who would never act without my orders." "Is that a confession, Mr. Harrington?" Zara asked coolly. Harrington's face darkened. "It's a statement of fact. Your accusations won't stand up in court. My lawyer will see to that." "The U.S. Marshal might disagree," Tom interjected. "Especially once he learns about the other ranchers you've intimidated. People talk when the law starts asking questions." "You have one last chance," Harrington said, ignoring Tom. "Sell to me now, drop the charges against Ellis, and you can walk away." "Otherwise," he let the threat hang in the air. "The Double M is not for sale," Zara stated firmly. "Not today, not ever." Harrington's hand moved toward his gun, but before he could draw, the sound of galloping horses approached from the road. The U.S. Marshal and several deputies rode into the yard, rifles ready. "James Harrington," the marshal called, "you're wanted for questioning in connection with cattle rustling, intimidation, and the murder of Benjamin Miller." Harrington's men looked to him uncertainly. "This is absurd," he blustered. "I'm a respected businessman. Your foreman's been talking," the marshal cut in. "Seems he doesn't fancy hanging for a murder you ordered." For a tense moment, it seemed Harrington might resist. Then, with a venomous glare at Zara and Tom, he raised his hands in surrender. As the marshal and his deputies took Harrington and his men into custody, Zara sagged against Tom in relief. "It's over," she breathed. "Not quite," Tom said, holding her steady. "There'll be a trial, testimony." "But Ben will have justice," she said firmly, "and the Double M is safe." In the months that followed, life at the ranch settled into a productive rhythm. Harrington and his foreman were convicted of Benjamin's murder and multiple counts of cattle rustling. Several smaller ranchers came forward with similar stories of intimidation, strengthening the case against them. With the threat removed, Tom and Zara focused on rebuilding the ranch's prosperity. They added Herefords to their stock as Benjamin had planned, expanded their grazing lands, and hired additional hands. And in the quiet moments between work, their relationship deepened. Tom found himself laughing again, planning for a future he'd thought forever closed to him. Zara's grief, while still present, no longer consumed her. One evening in late autumn, Tom took Zara riding to their favorite spot overlooking the valley. The setting sun painted the landscape in golds and ambers, the cattle grazing peacefully below. "I've been thinking," Tom said as they dismounted. "About staying on permanently." Zara smiled. "You are permanent. The ranch wouldn't run half as well without you." "That's not what I mean." He took her hands in his. I'm asking if you'll have me, Zara, not as your foreman but as your husband, partner in everything." Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. "Tom, I know it might seem too soon," he continued quickly, "and I know neither of us expected to find this again. But life's too short and too precious to waste a moment of happiness when it's offered." "Yes," she said simply, stepping into his arms. "Yes, I'll have you, Thomas Williams." They were married that December in the small church in Silver Creek, with Frank standing as Tom's best man and Mrs. Hayes attending Zara. The ranch hands decorated the house with pine boughs and ribbons, and the celebration lasted well into the night. Later, as they sat before the fire in what was now their home, Tom held Zara close. "I never thought I'd find peace again," he murmured into her hair. "Much less love." "Nor I," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. "It's strange to think that grief brought us together." "Not strange," Tom said thoughtfully. "Maybe it's that we recognize in each other the cost of loving deeply and the courage to risk it again." Spring brought new calves, green pastures, and the news that Zara was expecting. The ranch flourished under their joint care, becoming one of the most prosperous in the county. They named their first child Benjamin Thomas, a tribute to the brother whose loss had indirectly brought them together. And each year, on the anniversary of their first meeting, they would visit the cemetery together, placing wildflowers on Benjamin's grave. Not in sorrow anymore, but in gratitude for the unexpected gift his memory had bestowed, the chance for two wounded hearts to heal together under the vast Montana sky.